From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you, and here's what's ahead. Providing his weekly comments on the grain market trends, K-State's Dan O'Brien. This week, Dan highlights the forward contracting opportunities for you grain producers in Kansas right now and how those compare to the costs of production calculations that K-State economists have put together. Then from the IGP Institute here at K-State, Guy Allen offers his take on the USDA's World Grain Supply and Demand Report out earlier this week and what it says about the current and future status of U.S. grain exports heading into this new marketing year. And standing by to cover the Kansas agricultural weather scene with us, K-State's Mary Knapp, along with more here on Agriculture Today. Agricultural producers, landowners, and creditors, you have a partner in your legal and financial needs. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services offers reliable, trusted information and guidance. Whether you need advice for ag credit concerns or are transitioning your operation to the next owner, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services can assist you in making sound decisions for your business. To learn more, call 800-321-3276 or visit us online. This is the K-State Radio Network, and you're tuned to Agriculture Today. Glad to have you along. And to the grain markets, as we always do on a Friday, and opening up with observations from Dan O'Brien, grain market economist, K-State Research and Extension. Dan along with us from his office in Colby, northwest Kansas. Well, the latest grain price action, Dan, checking the charts. There's a definite weather influence in play here.
Yes, we've been paying attention to, particularly on the feed grains and for the oilseed markets, mainly corn, soybeans, on the futures. We've been looking at weather forecasts coming out of South America, and that's been a particular issue in corn futures movements. And now, after the report that had come out on Wednesday, here the day after that on Thursday, we saw major drops in the commodities. Well, May corn is just about a done deal. It's at the very end of its delivery period. All those May contracts, May corn, soybeans, and the wheat contracts. So we're watching July. July priced at $6.74 3/4 was down 40 cents. July soybeans down 58.5 cents. July wheat down 33 cents. I guess the perspective to have on these movements, I think when you get a move like that, I go and look at some of the technical signals to see if we're still in uptrends or just what we're looking at. I try to watch moving averages because they're the most simple of the tools to use and pretty relatable by people. Short run moving averages of, say, 3 days versus 3, 10, and 18, something like that. And when you look at the corn charts, actually looking at a 4, 9, and 18, we've basically come down to the 18-day moving average with the fall from highs of about 730 or so in the July contract, closed yesterday at 674.5. And of course, rains forecast. In the information we put together for the Ag Manager website that people can access here later, we show weather maps, forecast maps for this weekend, basically showing a substantial rains forecast for good chunks of Iowa, and they need it in those areas. But that's the forecast, and we've certainly sold the rumor. We'll have to see what the reality of it is. That moisture has affected both corn and soybeans. It's interesting that maybe it's just ironic that this year we're concerned about things being dry, so we get rainfall during a time of year when markets have gone way down. Give us 2 years ago. And if these same rains would have come, we were worried about delayed plantings. It was going the other way by these amounts. So anyway, given the context of where we're at, rains are coming or forecast to come. We'll see by the time you and I talk again a week from now how all that's played out. So as you said, for the charts, corn futures have come down, closed yesterday at 674 3/4. We'll see what happens today. For soybeans have not come down from a chart point of view, given their lofty levels. On the charting side of things, it doesn't look like it's as much damage really as for corn, even though the quantity is greater. Had highs of over $16, at least had traded as high as within the last day or so, up to 1660, 1670 there, towards 1670, closed at 1580. And yeah, that's down almost 58 cents. But if you look at some of the Bollinger Bands, which show the variability channels of movement, and you look at what happened for soybeans, we were running so high, so hot in the soybean market, we're not even back down to the middle of that channel. We still have tremendous prices. And for wheat, if there's anything that looks like it's more, I hate to say damaged, but charting-wise, more of a serious move in terms of what's happened, it would be on the wheat. And that's the one that moved the least in terms of cents per bushel. So wheat had been at highs around 735, 740, fallen off to closes of 657 and 3/4. It's fallen down to the highs that we were amazed at in February at these same levels. So they've fallen back down to that. The hard red winter wheat, of course, has harvest coming in. Not here. We're in May, June, July, just around the corner. So with rainfall coming and it's kind of cross market effects all in play, yeah, prices have come down lower.
Before we leave the wheat market, Dan, next week is the Wheat Quality Council's 2021 wheat tour through Kansas and surrounding states. Given the itchiness of the markets of late, would they be potentially even more reactionary to what's found out on that tour, more so than in previous years?
Well, they'll see moisture and they'll see green growth. Heading down to the south, we have had reports, crop insurance reports, when I say south, like Texas, of some severe damage, some low yields coming out of there. And some of the most severe areas that I had seen, I've heard my colleagues talk of in the west central Kansas region, again, Tribune, around those areas, they had caught moisture to live to fight another day, et cetera. So I guess the question will be, and Romulo and our colleagues will wrestle with this, did the damage that we had earlier from various either dry conditions or a couple of frost issues, diseases, who knows what, will that damage be reflected in these plants, even though we see recent moisture and green plant matter right now? And that'll be the thing to look at. Of course, they'll do what they have to do in that crop tour. They'll take what they have in the field and they'll assume normal weather to the end.
Right.
And I had one former colleague tell me that normal is just a setting on a dryer. So anyway, we'll see how that all works out. If there's anything that you'd wonder about with lots of green succulent plant matter, is what could happen if we turn dry and get some hot winds. Right. So, Eric, it sounds like I'm trying to talk up the wheat market. I'm not. But they'll see crops that have just been rained on that look green. But, boy, there's a lot of uncertainty yet in terms of getting to the finish line on the hard red winter wheat crop in western Kansas and some of these adjacent areas.
Well, let's take this angle, if we might, to round out our visit here today, Dan, and look at these forward pricing opportunities for growers out there, corn, soybeans, and wheat. And you've been talking up the value of knowing the cost of production as a point of reference for making marketing decisions here. And what do the numbers say in this respect? Well, using information that is on our Ag Manager website, it's just a matter of doing a search of cost of production in various parts of Kansas. When you look at full cost break even for irrigated corn in northwest Kansas on what's a low yield, 179 bushels an acre, you end up with a break even cost, well, our estimate about $4.22. If a person had to pay a lot more for crop inputs, does that go to $4.40, $4.50 thereabouts? So irrigated corn at that, and non-irrigated corn at 70 bushel, which is again on the low side. At 100 bushel, you go a lot lower. At only 70 bushel, $4.93. At 90 bushel, which is probably a lot closer to where we'll be at now with moisture we're hoping for, $3.79, $3.80. Forward contract bids for corn in Colby, $5.53. This is on yesterday's close. $5.44 in Salina, $5.30 Topeka, Garden City $5.88, Hutchinson $5.44, Columbus down from southeast corner $5.33. Each of those handily beating these both irrigated and dry land break evens, especially if you have decent yields. When you look at soybean forward contracts,
kind of focusing on non-irrigated right now. Non-irrigated soybean cost of production, pretty low per bushel. We still show by our numbers 506 at 41 bushels per acre. And if you have higher bushels than that, it's getting closer to 4. So forward contract prices for soybeans across the state, Colby 1307, Salina 1324, Topeka 1347, 1312 in Garden City, Hutchinson 1324, Columbus 1321. You're beating cost of production by, I'm big enough guy to get a calculator out. 13 minus 5 is what? $7-8. Mm-hmm. So yes, we've lost 58 cents on the market on what happened yesterday, but we still have tremendous financial opportunities. And yeah, we lost 58 cents. We got some of the best planting prices we've seen since the drought of 2012, still, even with the 58 cent drop. So I guess I encourage people to keep their focus on the real issue, which is profitability and survivability. Really, and what's closest, though, is on the wheat side.
Right.
Spot wheat prices, again, Colby 634, Salina 628, Topeka 662, Garden City 640, Hutchinson 628, 663 in Columbus. Cost of production for wheat break-evens, 536 thereabouts, and that's at 42 bushels an acre. If we have higher yields than that, then it gets down to 4.5, 425 thereabouts. So I think that even at these prices, 634, 628 thereabouts, you're still making $1 to $1.50 over what we project for break-evens, full cost break-evens. But we're coming into harvest. Just as you mentioned, Eric, earlier about that wheat tour coming through and the likelihood of interpretation of what they see out in the field looking pretty good, there's probably more weakness possible in the wheat market right now with harvest approaching than not.
Well, there's plenty for producers to be contemplating right now as per pricing opportunities, watching these market movements. Check out the information on costs of production at agmanager.info for the various grains, as well as Dan's notes for this week on the markets, agmanager.info. As always, a pleasure, Dan. Thanks. Next week, we'll talk once more.
Thanks, Eric. Take care.
He's a grain market economist, K-State Research and Extension, Dan O'Brien, on this part of Agriculture Today.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today, and we've bonus commentary on the grain markets for you now, centering on the international perspective as we've brought over from the IGP Institute here at K-State, the senior economist with the Institute, Guy Allen, who gets into those international numbers deeply and has some thoughts for us on what they're telling us from that USDA World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates report earlier this week, Guy. Corn, it's a tale of 2 crops, old crop and new crop here, you say.
Yes, the May report, Eric, was the first time the USDA came out with new crop numbers and supply and demand numbers, both domestically and internationally. So everybody was poring over those situations. While the report was probably a bit neutral for wheat and soybeans, corn was probably the biggest mover and was considered fairly bearish on the day. There's a lot of fund money in the markets at the moment. Matter of fact, last week's Commitment to Traders report showed a near record investment from fund and spec money, which doesn't surprise me given, I guess, the expected inflationary pressures we're going to see. We're back to a lot of people coming in using commodities as a hedge against inflation, similar to what we saw 2007, 8, and 9 when we had a significant quantitative easing. And quantitative easing we've seen recently is just makes 2007-8 pale in comparison. We increased the M2 money supply in 2020 by 25%, and we've already, I think, exceeded that so far with spending that we've seen this year federally in the U.S. So I think it's important to keep that in mind, and that has a significant impact on the relative value of not only ag commodities but a number of hard assets.
So that's worth having as a backdrop for the entire scope of the grain markets here. The corn fundamentals, though, what caught your eye?
Well, Brazil's what I'm really watching here at the moment. That summer crop is going to be key to bridging the logistical gap between the South American crop and the switch to the Northern Hemisphere come September. So the scope of that's going to be quite important. The USDA dropped that Brazilian number by 7 million metric tons to 102 million metric tons. That's about just over 4 billion bushels. Some trade analysts actually have that number under 100 now for Brazilian corn production, and it's going to be key. I just picked up this week, Brazil has bought, I believe, a total of 8 boatloads of corn from Argentina just in the last couple weeks, which indicates a domestic shortage in particular locations in Brazil. Interestingly, in Argentine, corn production was left unchanged at 47 million metric tons. That's about 1.8 billion bushels. On the demand side, look, China's the key factor in that as they've moved up to dominate the number one position in corn as corn importers. USDA did raise the total imports into China to 26 million metric tons. I'd continue to suggest that's probably a little light, probably closer to 30. World ending stocks looking for 2021 rose by 8.8 million metric tons, a bit higher than expected, with probably increased carryout mostly sitting in Argentina and increase in Brazil. But look, that's a long way away. Looking at 2021, Brazil and Argentina aren't going to plant that crop till this coming fall. So I think the reliability on those initial numbers, if I remember Dan O'Brien's numbers from earlier, is probably about 20%. So a lot of opportunity for change on that.
Before we wrap up on corn, the total exports to increase.
Yeah, look, total exports to increase. One thing, it's also important to remember, these higher commodity prices are giving not only U.S. farmer significant incentive to grow more, but also our competitors as well around the world. They can increase their production as easily as we can. So, look, total exports out of our competitors are expected to be up. Argentina by 2 million tons, Brazil by 1 million, Russia up 1 million, South Africa up 1 million, Ukraine up 7.5 million. That was a total of 12.5 million metric ton increase, so nearly 500 million bushels of increased potential competition from our competitors on that.
On the wheat side, then, if we might, Guy, and the indicators from that WASDE report, expectations of world record wheat production and world record wheat consumption. So do those balance each other out? Yeah,
world wheat production is forecast to be at 789 million metric tons. Consumption is also rising to a record level of about 785 million metric tons. That's going to be a difference of about 3.6 net at the end of the day, which is probably on the low side compared to the last 5-year average, but it's bringing those numbers closer together. Some of the notable changes on the production side, we saw higher production in the U.S., the UK, Argentina, the Ukraine. We've seen lower numbers in Australia and Canada, and also a higher production number in Russia. The thing with Russia, they currently have that export tax on and are really trying to regulate their exports of a number of commodities in an effort to control their domestic prices of commodities.
On that demand side, China has been in the market, but the indicators are, you say, that their wheat imports may fall off some.
Yeah, the USDA, I think China's import number for this current marketing year is at about 10.5 million metric tons of total wheat. For next year, 21-22, they're fading that back to just 6.8 million metric tons. Imported wheat into China is at a discount to corn, so we're seeing significant wheat feeding in China as well as in the U.S. and a number of places around the world. And effectively, we're relying on that wheat balance sheet and those surplus stocks to solve the corn or the feed grain balance sheets because of its tightness. So, look, that wouldn't surprise me. if we do bring those stocks down, that price relationship to corn to wheat should go back to putting wheat at a premium, you would think. Yeah. I think an important comment on the stock situation are the other 8 major exporters who we're competing with. Most of those are expected to increase to 62 million metric tons, or 21% of total global stocks. This is the first time in the last 4 years that the 8 major exporters have seen an increase in the total stocks, which should make us a little more comfortable on wheat. However, I'd suggest the scope of wheat feeding could bring that back down in line fairly easily, and we end the season actually tighter.
All right. Let's shift on over then to soybeans, oilseeds more broadly. Of course, all eyes remain yet on South America. Still a substantial crop, although the WASDE numbers weren't all that dramatic, Guy?
Yeah, the report was fairly neutral for soybeans. The Brazil numbers were left unchanged at 136 million metric tons for the current marketing year. Argentine production, they dropped by 500,000 metric tons, mainly unchanged at 47 million. For 21-22, they did raise production to record levels. Argentina increased to 52 million metric tons. That's about 1.9 billion bushels. Brazil's forecast to produce another record crop of soybeans, taking it up to 144 million metric tons, or that's about 5.3 billion bushels. Might be a bit of wishful thinking on the Brazilian situation, but look, they get rain, and I think they can continue to expand their soybean production quite significantly.
And when we talk about the soybean complex, well, we have to talk about the Chinese demand one more time here.
Yes.
Which has been extraordinary, with no signs of that letting up.
No, the USDA took China's 21-22 import number to 103 million metric tons. And again, that's a record import number for China. This current season, 2021, the number's at 100 million metric tons, and we're sort of on track to reach that. Their crush in China is expected to be about 96 million metric tons. Again, record demand. And what the key issue is in China, and something we've talked about, I think, for over the last years, is African swine fever situation. And in the last 4 weeks, we've seen an increase talk of reoccurring outbreaks of African swine fever. People are continuing to question, is that recovery really on track or where they're at? However, when you look at their current crushing rates and numbers, that would suggest there is significant growth across the whole livestock sector. And again, as I've said, I think it's as much as a shift from backyard feeding to commercial feeding as just the total pig numbers themselves in China.
Well, on the oilseeds, it's clear that we're entering this new marketing year with tight supplies. Will they remain so, would be the lead question.
Yeah, I think the key takeaway for the first glance at the 21-22 numbers for both corn and soybeans, we're in a very precariously tight situation going into 21-22. And I think those stocks-to-use ratios or ending stocks numbers for the coming marketing year will continue to keep prices at these elevated levels. Rather than just being a seasonal flash in the pan, taking us to these high levels, we haven't even started the year yet, and a lot can happen, as I suggested, between now and the end of the marketing year and in August 2022, and I think we should enjoy these elevated price levels. And then underpin that with the inflationary pressures and the loosening market supplies keep me quite optimistic, the absolute price levels. However, it's also pushing our input costs up as well.
Your perspective's always welcomed and appreciated. Thanks, Guy, for coming over.
Thank you, Eric.
Those are his thoughts on the USDA's latest world grain supply and demand numbers out earlier this week. From the IGP Institute here at K-State, Guy Allen, and we'll return with more on Agriculture Today.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
Broadcasting from the campus of Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you, and on to today's agricultural news headlines briefly, courtesy in part of DTN. The EPA will conduct public information gathering sessions this summer and fall relative to its plans to revisit the Navigable Waters Rule. Radhika Fox told lawmakers that during her confirmation hearing before the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee to be the assistant administrator for the EPA's Office of Water. She said the EPA will not keep the Trump version of the rule in place, nor will they return completely to the Obama-era Waters of the U.S. rule. She said that Administrator Michael Regan and she want, in her words, an enduring definition of waters of the U.S., one that can withstand administration changes. The Buddhist rule, of course, a flashpoint for many in U.S. agriculture, and that fed the Trump replacement of the rule. Agricultural interests will be following the process closely to make sure that a return to the Obama-era rule does not unfold. And U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai appeared this week before the Senate Finance Committee. She pledged she would be raising next week some issues with Mexico and Canada during a meeting of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement Free Trade Commission, including Mexico's announced ban on glyphosate and GMO corn and dairy issues with Canada. Well, because it was preempted yesterday as we looked at the latest numbers on Kansas net farm income from the Kansas Farm Management Association, we've held over this week's edition of the Kansas Soybean Update until today. And with that, as always, Greg Akagi. Greg?
Hannah Thompson-Weeman is joining us. She is Vice President of Strategic Engagement with the Animal Agriculture Alliance. And Hannah, AAA just recently came off of their Stakeholder Summit.
We just wrapped up the 2021 Virtual Stakeholder Summit themed Obstacles to Opportunities, and the conversation really lived up to that theme. We talked about challenges that are facing animal agriculture and the food system. We all know that 2020 was a difficult year. We're still facing challenges into 2021. But we wanted to focus on how to turn those challenges into opportunities and find the silver lining for animal agriculture. And that's exactly what we did at the virtual summit. It was also a record-breaking summit. We had just shy of 600 attendees. So that's really the silver lining of the virtual world.
Challenges yet as we start to open up more and more, a lot of opportunities there as well?
Absolutely. And one of the big focuses of the summit was talking about misinformation that abounds about animal agriculture, about meat production, whether it's about sustainability, animal welfare, any of those hot topics. We really talked at the virtual summit about why that misinformation is out there, where it's coming from, and most importantly, what we can do about it. And that's one big opportunity that we see coming out of the pandemic is that people have a higher appreciation for the food system, for farmers, for agriculture. There was a recent Gallup poll that farming and agriculture was viewed as the most trusted industry, and it had an 11-point increase in trust and positive viewed over the year before. And that means we need to be out there sharing positive information, especially right now about sustainability. One of our biggest focuses right now is sustainability. We've been around since 1987, and typically our biggest focus area is animal welfare, and we do still do a lot of efforts in that area. But last year and this year, it's that sustainability conversation that is dominating the media. We're hearing so much from our adversarial groups out there, activist groups, just hammering on that message that if you care about the planet, which everyone does, you need to reduce and ultimately eliminate your meat consumption. And that's despite the fact that that's not really reality or supported by science, but it's a message that's out there pervasively. So the Alliance works to provide a united voice on behalf of animal agriculture. And right now, our focus, a lot of our time, is on that sustainability narrative.
That is Hannah Thompson-Weeman, Vice President of Strategic Engagement with the Animal Agriculture Alliance, as she joins us on the Kansas Soybean Update. It's brought to you by the Kansas Soybean Commission.
Greg Akagi there. Thanks, Greg. And on it goes now to this week's edition of the Kansas Wheat Scoop. And with that is Marcia Boswell. Marcia?
After analyzing, mixing, kneading, baking, and tasting, a panel of judges has selected the final recipes that will be represented in the 7th National Festival of Breads, sponsored by Red Star Yeast, King Arthur Baking Company, and Kansas Wheat. This year's virtual event is scheduled for June 9th. According to Cindy Falk, co-chairperson of the event and nutrition educator for Kansas Wheat, the National Festival of Breads celebrates the creativity of America's home bakers. Join us on June 9th from the comfort of your home as we share the stories behind our finalists' winning recipes and announce who will be America's next top bread baker. 3 adult and 2 youth finalists have been named for the biennial National Festival of Breads, the nation's only national amateur bread baking competition. In addition to the 5 finalists, the judges also selected 27 honorable mention awards. Finalists and award recipients represented states from coast to coast. Want to help select a winner? Vote for the People's Choice Award on our website at nfb2021.com by May 25th. Finalists in the adult division include Barbara Easterbrook from Appleton, Wisconsin, with her hearty wild rice and tart cherry bread in the traditional breads category. Susan Simpson from Harrington, Delaware, with her apricot raisin babka ring in the sweetbreads and rolls category. And Anna Carrot Barth from Long Beach, California, with her savory Thai peanut sauce rolls in the savory rolls category. Finalists in the youth division are Maggie Schleichter from Clay Center, Kansas, with her strawberry lemonade swirls, and Maddie McKee from Wamego, Kansas, with her blueberry blossom tree braids. 27 entries received honorable mention awards from the judges. Honorable mentions are from 16 states, including Nebraska, Indiana, Maryland, Ohio, Minnesota, Washington, South Carolina, Texas, Missouri, Michigan, Wisconsin, Massachusetts, Kansas, Idaho, Arizona, and Connecticut. Visit our website at nationalfestivalofbreads.com for a full list of honorable mention award recipients. The virtual festival will premiere on June 9th on Facebook at facebook.com/National Festival of Breads. Like the National Festival of Breads Facebook page or sign up for the festival's newsletter to stay up to date on event details, connect with other attendees, and to get notified when the event goes live on June 9th. Then join the event premiere to see all of the finalists' recipes, hear from the finalists and sponsors, and find out who will be crowned the Best of Breads champion in America's Bread Baking Championship. For Kansas Wheat, I'm Marcia Boswell.
Thanks, Marcia. Rain dominates the immediate Kansas weather outlook, and K-State's Mary Knapp has more next here on Agriculture Today. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. Concluding this Agriculture Today, it's into the Kansas agricultural weather scene now with loads to talk about there. Mary Knapp joining us from the Weather Data Library at K-State, climatologist with K-State Research and Extension. Anticipating moisture aplenty, and we'll talk about that, Mary. But looking back, a rather uneventful week around Kansas?
It was a fairly quiet week. We did see some moisture. It was spread out kind of uneven in its distribution. Western Kansas saw some significant rains, as did the east central region. In fact, 2 divisions that were wetter than normal that had 100% or better were the west central and the southwest. So the total amounts were not as great as part of the eastern areas of the state, but it still was above what they typically would expect for the week, and very welcome moisture in that region.
To the point of putting a dent in the drought monitor?
Yes, actually, there was a slight improvement in the extreme western Kansas area along the Colorado border where they'd still been in severe drought. They moved that up to moderate drought. Unfortunately, that was balanced by an expansion of the abnormally dry conditions in central Kansas.
Which may likely change, and we're going to talk about that right here as this is one of the more major moisture events expected in some time around Kansas. We've had some rain so far this morning in the state.
Right. The initial band of rain came in the north-central area of the state, where over half an inch was seen in multiple locations. And that's just really the first round of the moisture that's expected over the weekend and indeed into midweek next week. Will complicate all of the graduation plans, but the rains are not going to be continuous. There will be breaks in that. We're looking at a break during the day today and then another round into the evening, and that pattern will repeat itself again through the weekend and into next week. Indeed, the quantitative precip forecast is calling for widespread areas of 2 inches or more across most of the state, and even in the western edges of the state along the Colorado border, they're expecting an inch or better.
What's coming together to create this prolonged and widespread rainfall event?
Well, basically what we've got is we've got a good flow of moisture from the Gulf of Mexico and a stationary front that's basically not moving, hence the stationary, which will trigger repeated storm events.
With that coming together then, as you say, widespread rain, an inch, maybe 3 inches in a number of places over these coming several days. In fact, there is a significant chunk of Kansas which will see, you say, upwards of 5 inches?
Right. There are some places, and again, this will be mostly in the southern areas of the state, particularly the southeast, which may see more than 5 inches of rain out of this event. Interesting that the biggest risk with this system is expected to be lightning and flooding potential. It's going to be a multi-day event, but there may be enough heavy downpours to create that flash flooding issue. So be alert as you're doing your weekend activities. Be prepared for that potential.
Any outside chance of hail or anything more severe?
That's always a potential for spring storm events, but at this time there are no watches or warnings out for the area. Again, it behooves our listeners to pay attention to the weather updates that come out and be prepared in that event. The rain would be extremely welcome as the wheat moves into its final phase of filling. We could do without any hail accompanying it.
Without question. And this system will stick around through the better part of next week then.
Right. This unsettled weather pattern is expected throughout at least the mid part of next week and maybe even further into the end of the week. So, again, what's welcome about this is we're not getting that 6 inches in a single day. Right. It's going to be spread out across the period, and that will allow for better penetration, better recharge of the soil moisture, but still have sufficient runoff that we should see some recharge of the stock ponds, particularly in the eastern part of the state. So all in all, this could be a very, very welcome change to our dry pattern.
Glancing beyond then, the extended forecasts, what are they telling us?
Both the 6 to 10 and the 8 to 14-day outlooks favor wetter than normal for our precipitation pattern. What's also going to be fairly welcome is that we are expecting warmer than normal temperatures. We've had a very cold spell to start May, and so having that warmer temperatures will allow the corn and soybeans to get a jump and get started. They've been kind of lingering there, not really moving much. Soil temperatures had gone backwards, and we had soil temperatures in the 50s where they had been in the 60s. So having a little bit of warmth to get those spring-planted crops growing will be a welcome change.
Then is it safe to declare an all clear on a late freeze?
It's never safe to declare that. Maybe in July when we're harvesting the wheat, we can say that the freeze risk is gone. But we've had freezes as late as the end of May. And out in western Kansas, even into the first part of June. So that potential is still there.
But the odds are declining.
The odds are declining at a very rapid pace right now. And also, interestingly enough, if we get a little bit of moisture and have a more moist environment going, those odds for dipping down into the freezing mark are less as well.
Yeah. Plan accordingly for the wet spell ahead of us, and again, take precautions in regard particularly of that flash flooding that could occur in several parts of Kansas in the coming days. Mary, enjoy the weekend. Stay dry. Many thanks to you.
Thanks, Eric.
Mary Knapp with us, climatologist, K-State Research and Extension. She's our regular Friday guest, talking Kansas agricultural weather. And it's a good time to remind you to take full advantage of all of that weather and climate information that Mary and her colleagues at the K-State Weather Data Library post and update routinely at the mesonet.ksu.edu site, mesonet.ksu.edu. Thanks to you as well for tuning in, and enjoy your weekend. Eric Atkinson here. This has been Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.